Welcome to The Long Ride Home. I'm your host, Alex Husner. This show is about honoring where we come from, pursuing what still calls us forward, and trusting the power of timing in both life and in sport. Through honest conversations with riders, trainers, and leaders in the American Saddlebred world, we'll explore the stories behind the horses and the people shaping the future of this industry. Come on this journey with me. Welcome back to The Long Ride Home. I'm your host, Alex Husner, and I am joined today with Brody Hickman, who is the CEO and founder of Brody Hickman Riding Academy. Brody, it's so good to see you.
So good to see you too, Alex. I'm so excited about this podcast today.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about it nonstop since I reached out to you. I'm like, I would be a good guest. I've got something to say.
I knew that right away. To get started, because, and I think, I always love telling the backstories on things too. I was actually at a conference for my day job, and I woke up one morning and I got your Facebook message, and you had sent me the most amazing, compelling video about wanting to come on the show. And I thought, oh my gosh, who is this guy? Like, I need to know him. He's got a great story and is clearly very passionate about Saddlebreds, which actually is not even the discipline that you really focus on right now. But before we get started, for our audience that might not know you, and I'm getting to know you, tell us a little bit about who is Brody.
I am Brody Hickman. I now run and operate and own Brody Hickman Riding Academy. I grew up, started riding right at the age of 7. If I'm not mistaken, I got my first riding lesson for my 7th birthday. And it happened to be at a Morgan farm, especially even that was 20 some years ago. But there was a lot of Morgan and Saddlebred integrated in the same barn. So they consider themselves a Morgan barn, but definitely had a few Saddlebreds in there. And I started riding when I was 7 weekly. My mom grew up in Montana competing on the rodeo circuit, the high school rodeo. So it was very different for her, but she had in her mind that she wanted me to learn how to ride English first. She's like, I want you to learn how to ride English. And then I think she had a route for me to go some sort of a roping rodeo route. But I fell in love with it. My weekly lesson turned into, I think I was 9, and I would work on Saturdays at the barn, whatever 9-year-olds can do. And it actually paid for my lesson on Thursdays, which back then was $30, I think, $35, which now I'm like, oh my gosh, like I would make no money charging $30. So that just grew into, working on Saturdays, paying for my Thursday lessons, like I was saying. And it just turned into more and more work. I was riding more horses. I was at the barn every day that I wasn't in school. And that started at the age of 10. And I really want to say around the age of 10 is when I decided, when I'm done with this school stuff, I want to be in a barn all the time in some way. That has changed over time. Like, wanting to be a horse trainer, work with Saddlebreds, do this, do that. But I knew some way I would come back. But I guess I've been riding now. I'm 27, so 20 years. And probably about 13 of them were saddle seat, majority Saddlebreds and Morgans. So yeah, that's kind of my come up a little bit, a short version. I went to a 2-year community college and I majored in equine business and training. It's here in Eastern North Carolina. That was quarter horse based. And that's where my love for quarter horses kind of came in. And I was actually, I guess, better at that when it came to like a professional standpoint. Like I had learned a lot more. The quarter horses at that college got me a lot more connections in the reining and the AQHA all around and pleasure, the hunter under saddle. I worked for a lot of those horse trainers and I fell in love with it, but I never did lose my spark for the Saddlebred. But that quarter horse background kind of led me up to where now I've decided to be an instructor, and a few years ago opened up my riding academy, and here we are now.
Wow, that's so cool. A lot to unpack there, and I've got questions. But one thing that's funny, I haven't done a ton of these episodes so far, but everybody that I've had on had some sort of influence from their mom or a grandparent or a parent that got them into riding. And I think it's really important just to touch on that, because it really shows for, all the moms and dads that are out there that might be listening, like, your kids are probably following.
They are.
Maybe under your bill, maybe it won't be when they can do it on their own, but it's such an amazing sport because of that. The legacy that comes from it, I think, is really special. So you rode, and I think when you were riding saddle seat, you were in New England. You were in New Hampshire, actually, where I'm from.
Well, I actually got a job up there later. I'm from North Carolina. So growing up, as a child, I did ride outside of Greenville, North Carolina, where I'm at now. Now,
Okay.
I moved up to New Hampshire after college, after the quarter horse spurt. I even took a little, like, I've got to go back to this. I was in my early 20s. I had settled in. I'd started a riding at not Brody Hickman Riding Academy, another one out of a reining training facility. They wanted a riding instructor. I was freshly 21 and I started panicking. I'm like, oh my goodness, is this like it now? Now I just work Monday through Friday. I'm like, I want to do something different. And I applied for jobs in the Saddle Seat professional riding instructor page. I actually came into that page after I became in there. I'm sorry, it was a different looking for help. I found that page on Facebook and I applied to everything up there. And I'm like, I don't have to take it. And then that's when I ended up moving to New Hampshire to the Lampropolises, who at the time was mostly just John and Sherry, and then Tyler was the trainer. And now that's all completely evolved. But back then I went to essentially work for Tyler, Sherry, and John Lampropolis. So I did get a lot of experience up there in the saddle seat. But as a child, I did grow up and ride here in Eastern North Carolina.
That's so cool. And I remember that barn and that whole team from back in the day. So,
oh, yeah. I thought about that when in your first episode introducing yourself. I'm like, gosh, she's got to know.
Oh, for names. Sure. I don't know them well, but the name is extremely familiar. And I remember them at shows and they, had horses that would compete against, the barn that we were at. So from there, what made you decide for your actual true profession to go back to the quarter horses that you worked while in college? Like, what was the calling to do that when you're clearly so passionate about the Saddlebreds?
It was. And so I went up north, and again, at that point, I guess I was 22. I moved up there. And for the first year, honestly, I was just a typical 22-year-old, and I just kind of did my job. I loved the horses, and I was really exploring the new area too. So when work was done, I totally went out and explored New England, which was kind of half the reason I moved away. I definitely just wanted to make sure my job was surrounded around Saddlebreds because I never had that experience growing up. The facility I grew up riding in was really academy based. Show horses, and I just always dreamed, I'm like, can I just touch one of the horses that are in a magazine, please? Can I touch something that trots above level, please? Or see a horse in a brace in person. A lot of the horses we went to were very local, one day, quick weekend open shows, but thanks to the Saddle Horse Report magazine, National Horseman, I was able to keep up with everything. And a little social media starting back then. This is late 2000s, so 2007, 8, 9, Facebook, YouTube. Definitely. I would rewatch the same sale videos on YouTube, which back then I felt like there was only 3 sale videos on YouTube. I know I'm wrong with that, and so I went up there, and truthfully, aside from I loved the experience they gave me, I went to the horse shows. I got to see horses trot over level, horses wear braces. I got the experience that the young child in me definitely wanted to experience. But truthfully, I moved up there during COVID, 2 weeks before COVID happened, if you could say. So everything was normal for about 2 weeks. And then boom, everything was done. And so we worked, however everybody was handling it then. It was a very odd situation, but I was definitely getting the experience I wanted. And then after a few years, my best friends and still good friends with Jill and Tyler Lampropolis, they were just full-time horse trainers, and they were pretty much the only friends I had. And I'm like, I just miss it at home a little bit. And so when I came down here, I just naturally went back to something that I knew I could do on my own, something that was comfortable to me, which was definitely teaching and definitely surrounded by quarter horses, reining horses specifically. But, both of those disciplines, and it's a big part of my program, I'm sure we'll get into, but they both are the same adrenaline rush, a reining horse running down and sliding stop, or a saddlebred turning, which I was able to ride a couple decent horses that Jill and Tyler's to give me that experience, but turn and just have that pass down the straightaway that you're like, that was great. Just that feeling. I get the same feeling. There's no difference to me. So it's very what do I want? What do I want? So when I came down here, naturally, I went into that, and now I've fallen in a deep love for my horsemanship program I've started. And, I love my angle to the Saddlebreds. I love my fan angle. And I just enjoy how I keep up with them. I'm not too into it. I don't know all the details about everybody. I don't know all this and that.
Yeah.
I enjoy just being a spectator. You said in that episode with the author of Skywatch, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on her name, but she mentioned in that episode, he said a lot of times the spectators are people with skin in the game. And that sentence is why I was like, I need to message Alex right now, because matter of fact, I have no skin in
have
the
no
game.
skin in the game, but you still
No
sought it
skin.
out. Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, oh yeah. No, it's my football. It's my football, and Louisville is my Super Bowl. And so I keep up with it all year. I keep up with my Richfield subscription. I pay the extra fees to watch the major horse shows. I do all the things to keep up with it. And then, yeah, I treat myself to Louisville. It is my vacation once a year, by the way. I take a week off and I go spend it with horses, of course.
It's amazing, amazing. And I think, again, there's a lot to unpack there. But to begin, saddlebreds, and I think horses just in general, I mean, like they touch you. And it's very hard once you've been bitten by that bug and once you've, spent a good portion of your early years growing up with them to just leave it forever. And, to your point about you don't have skin in the game, you choose to go to Louisville for your vacation. To be honest, I felt similar to what you described of you were watching from the sidelines, you followed all Facebook feeds and watched Richfield video. And there were several years that I would buy the Richfield video for Louisville because I still knew so many of the people that were there and I wanted to see them. And it's like, every time I watched it, it's like that deep yearning inside of like, oh, it makes me so happy to watch, but like, man, this sucks. Like I want to be out there and I miss it so much. But I think there's a lot of people like you that, I've come kind of extreme that I didn't do it for 26 years and then I jumped back in, bought a horse. But I think there's a lot of people like you or like me at that point that they would love to be able to come back and even just see it and just be around and just network as part of it. And I hope if anything, like more people do that because we do want more spectators. It doesn't need to be just all the people that own the horses that are there cheering, and the people that have remembrance and a memory for it are probably the most likely or the low hanging fruit to get back at some level. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to come back, buy a horse, get super involved with it, but there's something still really special about just seeing it and being part of it. And for me, we've been to 2 shows so far. We went to JD Massey and we went to Asheville. And now when I get the magazines, because I've just saw those horses show, it is so cool. And I'm like, oh yeah, I remember
Is
that.
it not?
It's so cool. Like, it's brought it back to life in a way that I used to always get so excited when the magazines would come, but now there's reality to it, which is really cool. And one thing, when I came back into this, simply because of the fact that there's no saddlebred barns anywhere near here, I did think about what if I explore a different discipline? I wasn't closed-minded to it, but I didn't know anybody locally that did it. Like there are some barns, but I had, zero connection to that discipline or to any of the people. And so I made the decision to go the long haul and do what I love. But what was that like, learning to ride the quarter horses after, being in saddle seat for all those years?
Oh my goodness. So let me tell you. So I rode, I think everybody's kind of like, I've ridden quarter horses growing up and kind of trail type horses, I guess. So nothing that was super broke. I didn't understand what a broke horse meant when it come to a quarter horse. I didn't know when like, wow, this one's really broke. This one really knows its job. It was kind of like, if you want to go left, pull left, and whatever.
Yeah.
Kind of backyard, I guess, is a good way to describe it, which is what I was used to with the quarter horses. And that was kind of my only mindset about quarter horses, is they were like lazy, seemed to have no personality, and they were boring, I guess.
Horses, yeah.
So I signed up at the community college. I don't remember where my head was then, thinking about going and riding, having to ride quarter horses. I assumed that I knew I would pick up on it or have some sort of appreciation for it, but I had no clue. But, at the college at the time, they had 40, 50 horses, all quarter horses, all different backgrounds. And the first horse that I got assigned was actually a Western pleasure horse. And I got on, and Alex, this is how I looked. I was like this. I'm going to fall over its head. I leaned back so far. There's nothing here.
Yeah.
And my instructor was like, well, what do you need there? I'm like, it's head. I need the neck up here. Like, what in the world? They're like, loosen the reins. My horse, I'm like, holding it tight a little bit, I'm like, well, it was a learning curve. Let me tell you that's the short version. But I will never forget when I was trying to play it cool. Everybody's in there. Although everybody probably felt the same way I did. And I just leaned way far back and looked down. I'm like, his neck and head are like on the ground. I'm like, and it wasn't, but it felt like it was compared. I was used to it. That was such a different feeling. And then it took me, I want to say, no time to kind of pick up on it and understand what I was searching for, what I was feeling for. And then from then on, it was over with. I was hooked on it just as much.
Wow. And so just from point of curiosity, because I've ridden hunt seat, I guess. I've definitely done Western on trail rides when we go on vacation and stuff like that. But like, where is the thrilling part of riding in that type of a discipline? You mentioned the reining. So like, how does the thrill come? Like in comparison to to what you described of riding down the rail on a saddlebred that's flashy moving.
So, and then the quarter horses, there's so many variations. I'll specifically talk to you about like the Western Pleasure, which is that very slow, and to put it in a typical voice, especially for probably a lot of the audience, they look like lame when they're loping, and that's the Western Pleasure. And then you have the reining, that is a lot more cowboy fast, doing the cow maneuvers. The thrill in like a Western Pleasure horse, when I get on one of those, the thrill is not the speed, the thrill is the way it feels, getting one to be so connected to you, where, when I ride a pleasure horse and I've got a big loose rein, I'm thankful to have a great lesson horse. One of the lesson horses of mine is a Western Pleasure horse. He's my canter teacher, my lope teacher, and he's so fun. He's such a cool horse. But anyway, when I get on that horse and I put my hand down on that big loose rein, I should be able to control that horse just through my seat. If I want to go to the left, my belly button just drifts a little. And the thrill there is just the
precision.
Everything is so light, that loose rein, so light. And then the same thing with the reining horses. I mean, in every reining pattern, there is large, fast circles you run, and then you slow them down to a small, slow circle. And that's in every pattern. But nothing is better than on a loose rein, running a horse, and you sit back and, my cue is to kind of scissor my legs. I put some pressure in my first stirrup, never touch that bridle, and feel that horse.
Feel them. Yeah.
And then you just ride that low. And then when I, want to extend personally the horse I'm showing now, I stand up in 2-point. And as I'm slowly standing up in 2-point, it's like you're slowly pushing the gas pedal, no effort on my end. That's the thrill, and then the reining, the sliding stops is amazing. The spinning is amazing. But the Western Pleasure and the Husner under saddle, which pretty comparable. Both of those, it's like when it's fun is when it just feels good. Everything is just so connected and soft and easily guided, willingly guided. And when that is happening and you are just cruising around, almost like you could put your 90-year-old grandma up there, and that's the feeling.
But that's the thing, though. You really couldn't just put your 90-year-old grandma, because your horsemanship and your ability to ride are what's making that happen, right? But to you, when everything feels that good, it feels easy. I'm just thinking back on last weekend, I rode Chapstick for the first time in a couple months. And the only reason I wasn't riding him was we went to those 2 shows and we brought him there just to practice being on the road, practicing in the work arena, practicing in the actual show arena. We wanted that to be a good experience. So I didn't ride him, just Andrea did. But last week when I was up there, we had several passes, slow gating, that I literally, in the video at the end of one of them, I said, I was like, that was so much fun. Like it's like that feeling of like when it just feels so right that like
it was just effortless.
Yeah. And it's just like when you feel like you've got it, he's got it, the rhythm is there. And I think ultimately the takeaway is like, it doesn't matter if the horse's head is right here or if it's down there. But like when you've also feel like you've mastered something. And in that moment, like I had really mastered the bridle with him on that pass. And it just felt so right. And I totally get that it doesn't have to be the fast moving action that is the exciting part. It is the suppleness and the connection with the horse, and the horse understanding what you're asking him to do. And great.
That's what drives me in it. Because I get that question a lot. And especially with me crossing over into both worlds, I find myself so much in the quarter horse world, which is not like an everyday occurrence, but I'll constantly advocating for the saddlebred, and then vice versa. I'll advocate for the well, it's a big part of my program is advocating for all discipline.
Well, I'd love to know more about the program. So tell us about the academy and like, what is your focus? Like, how did that evolve?
In my riding academy, with me coming from all different disciplines and traveling all over with those disciplines, I didn't really want to choose a discipline to kind of label my academy as. So I knew that I wanted to stick quarter horse based. Again, that was where I was most comfortable. And then Western based, as in, I guess we ride in Western saddles. It's what I had the most of at the time, and it's just what I just kept accumulating. But the point of my program is strictly a horsemanship program. When you come out for your first riding lesson, the riding lesson starts with, here are the halters. Now let's go learn how to catch your horse out of the pasture safely, properly, put the halter on. And let's say, the lessons are an hour. Let's say catching the horse and learning how to put the halter on took 20 minutes. That 20 minutes is in that riding lesson because you need that 20 minutes. We don't need to rush the little things. And that's my biggest takeaway, or my biggest point in the program, is to not skip the little things that so many of these big programs skip, and because they don't have the time, honestly, nobody has that type of time. And so I like to really make my program niche about the small things, safely catching a horse. And then that just grows all the way up until we're doing fine lead changes, catching the horse, tacking the horse up. If that takes 30 minutes of our lesson, then that's 30 of our lesson. And, sometimes I don't have a ton of pushback because I pretty much make sure everybody has a good understanding of the program. But, people want to ride the horse. But I let people know, I know you want to ride, but that is only a tenth of the whole point here. I want you to truly know how to care for the horse. And that leads into my other thing. My whole program is outdoors. I don't have a covered or an indoor. And so we have rain and my arena gets wet and it gets soaked. And I run my program off a tuition base. So every month, bare minimum, everybody has one lesson a week they pay for and they have to meet that minimum. And at first I was kind of brainstorming and I turned it into what I call farm management lessons. And that's kind of a wide variety. But in these lessons, we learn how to take horses' vitals. We learn about nutrition. We learn about the sickness, how to deal with the sickness. I also work out of a boarding facility of about 40 horses. Somebody has a cut. Somebody has torn their fence down. Somebody has a board. I mean, we fix fence, we treat wounds, and I really have a lot of hands-on. And typically how I run my farm management lessons, for example, last few weeks ago, I talked about choking and colicking with a group of kids. We have like a lecture portion. I bring them in a classroom setting. We sit down, we talk about choking, we talk about colic, and then we actually go out and we have the lab portion of our lesson. And that is, checking the horse's temperature, listening to gut sounds. And then I'll kind of have like a hypothetical moment set up where the horse has, drainage coming out of their nose. They've got their head dropped low. They're constantly coughing. Those are signs of choke. And I want the kids, and I'm really big on, I always say, everybody can walk, trot, and canter. Who can't walk, trot, and canter? How about tell me what happens if your horse is colicking? Then I'll think you're cool. That's what I say. It kind of gets the teenage girls a little more pumped about the boring farm management lessons. It's really the full picture for me. I'm not all about the riding and the showing and the success as much as I think you're very successful the more knowledgeable you are. And if you can truly care for a horse and keep yourself and the horse safe in any predicament. And so that's really how I treat it. And, we have our group of lesson horses, but I constantly teach the general way to, catch a horse. My horses are great. They're lesson horses. A lesson horse. I mean, they're great. They're sweet. They don't do anything wrong, but we don't get comfortable with that. We don't get comfortable with those moments. We still catch our horse properly, groom them, walk around them properly. We don't get comfortable. And I'm really big on that section of it. All of the little things. I think being a groom for so long, I kind of am like, well, these are the things I'm really freaking good at. And I'm like, how about I teach the things I'm good at, and then of course riding, I don't think I'm too bad at either, but I was like, no, I miss a day of lessons. That's like 10 kids that need a makeup ride. I'm like, oh my goodness, I need to think of something. And to tie into the reason I reached out to you is we watch, if there's a horse show going on, we actually watch Richfield as a group. And I have a lot of my students. We watch the Saddlebreds together. We learn about them, on a pretty surface level. I have a few kids that ask more questions, but we go to these open shows with these Saddlebred, and I'm finding more of my kids are actually kind of sneaking up to the ring for the saddle seat division to watch it. And I'm game for it. You do not need to be on it, but that's kind of where I wanted to come in and talk to you about. I'm like, I do nothing but talk about Saddlebreds for someone who's around all these quarter horses all the time.
Right. No, and I think that's so cool. I mean, I think one, it's super cool that you're teaching these kids about true horsemanship and true horse ownership, right? It's not just about going to the barn, getting on a lesson, and then you leave. I mean, and that's an important part. And I know growing up, that was always part of it. Like on my lessons, typically the groom would get the horse I owned ready, but I would always put him away with the groom. But then the lesson horses, we would get the lesson horses ready. We would put them away. We'd clean our saddles. We'd clean the bridle. Like we'd do the whole shebang. And I think that's an important part. What you're talking about takes it to a different level that I haven't heard a whole lot of barns doing that, of like actually teaching what's going on medically with the horse and how you deal with things. And I think that's a really cool part of it. Is it mostly kids, or do you have any adults that are in the academy?
Right now I have 32 students and 10 of them are adults. So 22 under the age of 18 and then 10 adults. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And so they come up, they ride once a week, but then it sounds like, are they all riding together, or is there a separate one that's the class where you have everybody?
So the farm management lessons, with everything being outside, we have plenty of those naturally. I don't really have to plan them.
So it's based on,
the weather. And I'm like, last week I had 3 days of it because of the weather. And so I'm like, if I plan it, I'll have too many farm managements.
Yeah. No, but that's really cool. And I think it sounds like probably a good part of why you even thought to go that route. I mean, even calling it an academy, to be honest, like you were trained in equine business. So, I mean, you went to school for this. I'm sure you learned a lot about that. And I think that's an interesting perspective on this too. But what if somebody came to you and said that they wanted to learn saddle seat? Like, would you consider getting a saddle seat lesson horse, or like, where do the horses come from? I guess is
right. No, I would not be opposed to it. That's a really good question. It ties in to kind of a major point I left out about my program. But with the program being horsemanship based, I would totally be into getting a saddle seat type lesson horse, a Morgan or a Saddlebred.
Yeah.
Letting somebody completely learn that way. But we still will go catch that horse together first.
Oh, sure.
That type of stuff for sure. I would get you to a certain point. It's almost like a graduation process. So the way that everything works here is that I will teach you how to do A, B, C, D. And it's kind of like a non-discipline riding. We ride Western, I guess. Get you to a certain point, and then you can choose your discipline. So I want to get you to pick up correct leads, know your diagonals, bridle a horse safely, know where the tack sets. And then if I have a student, I have got probably 10 of them right now, I could send to a jumping barn, a saddle seat barn. And that trainer, they could say, hey, go in here, catch this horse in the stall, tack it up, bridle it. And there should be no reason, even though it's a saddlebred, and that they should not be able to go in that stall, safely catch that horse by reading their body language, knowing all of the stuff that we've gone over a million times. They should know where the saddle sits on the horse's back, if it's where it's supposed to go, where the girth is supposed to go, how to properly bridle a horse. And then they can go take a saddle seat lesson. But with my program, there should be no reason why. Again, I've got 10 right now that I could send to Andrea, and she could say, hey, go saddle this horse, put a bridle on, meet me in the arena. And until they go to get on, that's when they might say, how do I hold my reins, or this or that. But besides that, no, when Andrea's like, look, canter on the left lead, the kid should know what I should feel in the horse's body to know which lead I'm supposed to get. So there's small little things that change it, but that's how it works, is a graduation. And, some of them stick around, it doesn't necessarily work like I send them off somewhere. But that is the point, is that I kind of sell myself as being like, come here first. Let's learn how to do everything and then go do the fun.
I think you could have an amazing business model of doing what you're doing, but then also have at least a couple horses that could do hunt seat, saddle seat, or Western, and teaching people all three, or the kids or adults, all three, and like determining what maybe they might be the best at, because I've never heard of anything like that before, but that could be such a cool way for somebody to get into riding, because in a lot of cases, you get into riding because there's a barn that's close to you, right? Or because your family did it. But who knows? I was born into saddle seat and into Morgans first and then Saddlebreds. But if there had been a hunt seat barn down the street, I could have ended up loving doing that. But
who's to
now,
know?
because I know what I know and I'm sticking to that, I'm cautious about, could I go and ride another discipline? But I think when you open somebody up to being able to just be a true horseman and to be able to ride whatever horse it is and whatever saddle it is, and like your body knows to adapt, that creates a really good rider all around. And I think that kind of plays into the academy factor there, which I think is brilliant.
It does.
Really cool.
I actually kind of run because of so many backgrounds I have, I do take my students to the horse shows. We take my lesson horses, and nobody in the Western quarter horse community really does it like this. I essentially run my quarter horses like it's my academy riders. They'll go in, they show a few classes, they're sharing horses, we're swapping tack. We're doing kind of things that nobody else in our division is doing so much. But to me, it's so normal. I take a gangle of kids up to the arena. We've got 3 horses and everybody's showing that day. And it is very different. I'm not going to lie. I haven't found somebody that pushes the things that I push, at least in my area. But I love it. And I think it gives the kids a lot of opportunity. I'm really big. I didn't have a ton of opportunity growing up, wanting to show big and go to the big horse shows and do that kind of stuff. So I try and give some opportunity to some of my students, and that may not ever get that opportunity. I kind of see myself in a lot of them. And so I kind of bust my tail to try and get them all in the show pen, riding a horse. I don't care what it is. Fall in love with the horse is my biggest thing. And then you can choose whatever it is you want. You can have a favorite thing, but love the horse first. And so I push that a lot.
I love it. Yeah, I can see you being, and I'm sure you already are, just a great resource to the community of the discipline that you mostly focus on, because that's one thing that's been surprising to me getting back into it. And I think just because I'm familiar with what I'm familiar with, and most of the barns in New Hampshire with the barn I rode at, and also the other ones, they all had lesson programs, and then you could have your show horse there. But there's a lot of barns, especially in North Carolina, that they, even including the one that I ride at, that they don't have a leg up program. Like there's not a lesson program program. So how do you, as somebody new into the sport, like you've got to find a barn that has that. But I think there's a need for sure to grow all disciplines in the academy kind of model that you're looking at. I'm curious to ask you this question too, because actually Emma that came on, the Skywatch author, we were talking about the numbers and like in Saddlebreds in particular and how everybody's talking about how they've gone down over the years. But she pointed out in her research for the book that when you look at quarter horses, even though there are more quarter horses born each year, they have also gone down proportionally. But from your perspective, since you go to those shows, like, does it still seem like there's a lot of people at them, or like, have you noticed a drop off over the years in doing this?
I definitely have seen it over the last, I've kind of been in the quarter horse scene for, I guess, right at 10 years now. And I have seen, the numbers decrease in some events, like the Western Pleasure seems to be something that's going down. But at the AQHA shows, they have all the disciplines there. So you'll see Western Pleasure horses, hunt seat horses, but like the pleasure division is slowly dying down. There's a newish division called ranch riding. And I mean, that is just, it's insane numbers in ranch riding. And the numbers as a whole, so much more than the Saddlebreds in general. So, like the numbers are going down, but the classes, I would say, if I were to compare it to typical Saddlebred class, the classes are still bigger, but to us, it's still slowly dying. But again, like I said, it seems to be decreasing in some of the disciplines and then in others like ranch riding and reining ever since that Yellowstone show come out. I mean, reining, it just blew it up. Taylor Sheridan has changed the industry for what I think is the good. I mean, it's brought a lot of, how many people I can talk to about reining, and I'm like, have you seen Yellowstone? The horses that do the slide.
Well, and to your point, I mean, there's rodeos now way more often. I mean, there's rodeos probably about like 30 minutes from where I live in Myrtle Beach, and people that I know that are friends of mine that don't know anything about horses, they'll be like, yeah, I'm going to a rodeo this weekend. I'm like, what? Really? But it's because of the publicity. I mean, and I think I'm really glad that you brought that point up, because we talked a little bit about this before we hit record, but it's like, I think within any industry, within the horses, I mean, horses, one, it's not a cheap hobby to get into, it requires time, it requires money, it requires a lot of effort and things like that. But there are people that will dedicate their personal hobby time to something like this, but there has to be that visibility to even know that there are other things out there besides doing the traditional activities that a middle schooler would do. But I think there's just not really that education. And I think in some of the other disciplines, they've done a better job of bringing in, different types of influencers or celebrities to be able to share that message. Or I don't know if you did, but Andrea had posted a couple months ago about getting Snoop Dogg to come to.
I was all in it. I'm like, repost, come on.
Yeah, I mean, it would be fabulous, and it's like, it's going to take something like that to bring the awareness. And I think that doesn't mean that, okay, everybody that Snoop Dogg's audience is going to go out and buy a Saddlebred. But when you have awareness of something, you do end up finding the people that could be, within that consideration set, that now maybe they do start following the Facebook pages, and now they're like, this is something that I want to get into. And it's not a quick decision, but the more eyeballs you can get in front of it, I think it's an important thing for all disciplines, really.
Yeah. I have a partner that has no clue into the horses at all, but quick side note, he is like, I think my favorite thing to watch is the Saddlebreds and the reining, which I was like, thank God, because that sounds like a great mix. And hearing him describe the Saddlebreds, he's like, I just love how they hold their head up so high, and they just act like they're the most important thing there. And he, we're like, oh yeah, they do. But it's funny hearing that from him and from like a complete outsider, no idea, never seen a Saddlebred probably until he was around me. To describe them the way we want them to be described.
Right. It's funny when you have somebody that, is close to you to see their reactions to seeing all this stuff. I mean, for me, that's for sure my husband in this sport. And now that he's been to 2 horse shows, God, he literally released my first episode. I said he'd had basically a crash course, which he had in about 3 months there. But he's about an expert now. I mean, like, he really knows stuff. Like, he remembers which horses are at which barns and which trainers are who. And he calls, if it's like a roadster class, he calls them the wheelies. He loves those. I was trying to test him, and when we were at JD Massey, each class, if we were just sitting there watching, I'd say, okay, at the end, I want you to tell me which one you think's the winner. And every single time, him and I were aligned. And I think that shows to the point of, this isn't so confusing that nobody can understand what we're doing here, but you can tell, and most people have an eye for, what looks like the best picture. It's fun seeing somebody else learn alongside something that all the answers to, but the questions they ask are a lot of fun.
It is. I'm kind of like, I've never thought about that, but yeah, I guess,
Yeah.
you ask questions that does make you think sometimes too. You're like, well, I don't
Why
know.
do we do it that way? Okay, so you have a few funny stories. I want to end on a couple of these before we go. The first one that you mentioned was about when you conned your parents into leasing a saddlebred. So tell me that story.
I did. Like I said, growing up well, I just was craving to be on a show horse, something above level. That's what I used to think about as a kid. I was always on the academy horses, and I was searching, I guess it must have been on Facebook. This was 2014 time, and I was 15 at the time, and someone in town, probably 30 minutes away, had posted a saddlebred. They wanted to lease the horse out, kind of like a lease to buy. Now, this horse was still he was an older horse. I think they ended up wanting like $15,000 for him. Kind of knew the girl from showing locally. The horse himself kind of showed locally, but in my eyes, he was like a show horse. He wasn't a lesson horse, right? So, I tell my mom, I'm like, they want to lease it. At the time, I was working at the barn where I was riding, and they were like, hey, if you want to bring it here, you're working already. Like, you can have a stall. My mom and dad were like, actually, maybe you can do it since we don't have to pay $1 million to do it all.
Yeah.
And, I look back on it now. I was just talking to my mom a few days ago, telling her I was coming up here to talk to you. I'm like, why did you not investigate me more? But I told the owner of the horse, my mom kind of let me facilitate it a little bit. I'm like, I've got it. I know her, and she's gonna.
It'll be fine. Yeah.
Well, then they start calling. Probably her grandmother starts calling my mom, I guess like a month or two into the lease to buy, kind of like, hey, you've had him for a little bit. Like, are you thinking you want to go ahead and start making payments? And the first phone call, I was sitting in the truck and I answered my mom's phone. She wasn't in there. And, I kind of played it off and I was like, I'll call you back. Start panicking. And of course, that ended, a few weeks later, her grandmother got a hold of my mom, and mom's, I owe you money. I didn't know. And, of course, it turned into what it was. But that's something I will never forget is I cannot believe. And I had him in there with me for probably 4 months. I had the horse and I showed him.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Now, this was a little local moment, it was.
Yeah.
That scandalous, but it was funny. I'm like, my mom got me a suit. She's like, well, we don't have to pay for the horse or the stall. She got me a Reed Hill suit. It was too big for me. I was a big boy then too. Nothing didn't tell me anything. I was finally in a full bridle on a horse that had a show package on. I had a suit on. You couldn't tell me anything. Best day ever. I wouldn't trade it for anything. And then that second story I wanted to tell you was my first time to a major horse show, which until Louisville 2 years ago was the only time. I think it was 2012, and I went to Junior League when it was on the Red Mile, possibly 2011 around that time. We were on a road trip. I did not feel well. We were going through Kentucky. My mom kind of been saying it wasn't on our itinerary, but she's like, Brody, if the stars align, we'll stop at the horse show for a few minutes and maybe we'll just stay over in Lexington that night. And I wasn't really feeling well. I didn't say anything all day. I'm pestering her about it, pestering her. Well, she finally just agrees and we go up to the horse show and we're walking around and I can tell it was a sickness, like I was going to be sick.
Oh no. No.
I did not. You are not ruining this for me. I've never seen these horses before. I mean, and on the Red Mile, I feel looking back now, I was so blessed to be able to go and see that. So we get some food, or they do, however the scenario goes, and we go sit down. And back then I was really big in watching a girl. Her name was Zoe Schaffel, and she had the Perfect Touch Farm down in Florida. And then Hunter Chancellor back then was another exhibitor that I was just obsessed with, just a touch older than me. And there was a whole slew of them. Jessica Westoven was one of them. I used to watch her. CH, Can You Hear Me Now? I loved that.
Yeah.
I'm like back fangirling right about all this. But anyway, I don't remember who else. It was a slew of those girls I saw in the magazines. That's how I described them for a long time. But one of them was Hunter Chancellor, just the only one I remember. I got sick behind them.
Did they know?
They did. They all turned around and like, oh, are you okay?
Oh my gosh.
And we get to the car and I'm kind of crying and, I feel much better at that point, but we left and my mom's like, I'm like, those are the girls from the magazine.
Yeah.
I was so excited and it lasted a few minutes until I got sick.
Man.
They're all kind of cute and they're
dressed up. Yeah. Like, I remember those days. Oh my gosh. Well, but you know what? So from the two stories that you told, you made it happen. You were gonna get a horse and you were gonna get your parents to take you to that show regardless. And I am also very glad that you got to see the Red Mile for Lexington. I mean, the last time I was there was the year 2000, but I mean, it was many years after that they moved the show. But getting to see that is getting to see a piece of history. So that's really cool that you got to see that. And literally that's probably the hardest ring in the world to ride in. When I watch my videos back now, I'm like, oh my God, in the rain, you're going downhill and then you're coming uphill on the second straightaway. And it's like, that was such a challenging show to ride at. But, so about the Academy, if anybody's listening, and myself included, I would love to come up one day. And I would love to get a lesson from you on reining and like just trying the different discipline. Like, I think, especially since I know you, like I said, I mean, I don't know, I'm interested in all those disciplines. I just don't know anybody here that does that, but I would love to come up and get a lesson. But there could be other people that are listening. I know there's a lot of people in North Carolina that have saddlebreds and not just have horses that listen to the show. But what's the process? Can people just come up for a lesson, or like, do you have to join the Academy? Like, how does that work?
It's pretty niche, you know, somebody wanting to get an experience for sure. Anybody can reach out to me and come grab an experience. Typically, including into the program and doing monthly, but somebody traveling to me, I would not hesitate to throw you guys up there. And if I'm not mistaken, you're in Virginia, right?
No, I'm in Myrtle Beach. So, and I just Googled. Yeah, it looked like we were way closer on the map, but it's still basically everything that I need is 3.5 hours for me as far as horses. But there could be a weekend that I come up and I do that on one day, because I really do believe, I think that there's value in, for all the different disciplines, to learn to ride the other disciplines. You know, I mean, to really become better horsemen and horsewomen. I think that could be kind of cool. So maybe I would
center on a horse is never going out of style, for sure.
Yeah.
We all do the same thing, and we're a lot more similar than we realize.
Thank you for promoting Saddlebreds to the people that are part of your academy. I think that's really important to have, really impactful to have somebody that's not directly in it be talking about what we do and Saddle Seat and Morgans and everything else. So I think that's really cool. If anybody wants to reach out and learn more about you or the Academy, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Facebook, Brody Hickman Riding Academy.
Okay.
Message me straight up there. If you want my personal page, just Brody Hickman. Both I will answer to. But yeah, anybody wants to come spin around, let me know.
Awesome.
That would be awesome.
Thank you, Brody, so much for reaching out and for coming on. This is kind of like a different type of episode, but that's also where I wanted, when I started the show, you know, the goal wasn't just to have just all the people that everybody know come on. Like, I wanted to have different people from different perspectives. And, you know, you are clearly very passionate about what you do. And that includes, you know, your love of Saddle Seat and Saddlebreds and Morgans too. So really, really cool.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm like over the moon. This was amazing. Are you going to visit Louisville this year? It's my vacation. I've already got it marked.
I'm TBD on that, because I know for sure Chapstick's not going. So I don't know. And part of me is like, I want to wait to go to Louisville until either me or my horse can show. I mean, I've been to 2 other shows without showing, but like, I don't know. We'll see. I will let you know though for sure, because I'd love to meet you in person. And for anybody listening, if you'd like to come on the show, or if you know of somebody who would be a good person to come on and share their story or their perspective, I'd love to hear from you. I'm not new to this. I'm old to this, but returning, but I don't have all the connections anymore. And so I'm, you know, just trying to figure out who makes sense to come on and share the story of the world that we love so much. So if you're interested in coming on the show, or if you want to reach out to me, you can go to thesaddlebredpodcast.com. And until next time, thanks everybody.